Hello, my name is Ashley Hood and I am the lead color instructor here at Suki's Salons. Today, I'm going to take you through how we do a classic head of long-haired highlights with a herringbone pattern on a mannequin head. So let's get started. Your three main takeaways from this video are going to be placement, application, and sectioning. So this is going to be your main sectioning when it comes to your mannequin head. You are going to do your 4 quadrants, and then where the crown splits or the occipital bone, you're going to take it into a V like that. If you're having a little bit of a problem with your V, not to worry. When we go through the head, it'll actually make a natural V part and it'll be easier to find. So when you're taking your sections, you always want to make sure that you're holding the hair tight and that you're combing it so that everything is nice and clean. And then I like to comb it upwards too, to make sure you get all those baby hairs. For this first section, you're going to want to take it at a slight angle. You don't want to start getting too angled or else your foils are not going to fit properly, but you also don't want there to be a line right at the nape of the neck. And I like to comb, twist, and clip. Now, since this is right by the nape of the neck, and when you have your hair up in a ponytail, it's going to be one of the first things that you see. I always like to start with a baby light at the nape. A baby light just means a very, very fine, small weave, as opposed to your traditional weaves that we would do that are more resembling the size of spaghetti. This one is going to be more about the size of angel hair pasta. So when you are taking your weave, you want to get nice and close to the root. You don't want to be taking it from down in the mids because then you can't get the foil close enough to the root. You want to make sure your section is clean and taut, right up to the root, and make sure you do very nice fine weave. Now, when it comes to taking your weave, you don't actually want to be using your wrist for the motion. You want to use your arm. If you do continual wrist motions, you are going to end up getting a lot of pain within your wrist and it could result in carpal tunnel. Where if you're using your arm, it actually helps to alleviate some of that pain and just make sure that you're going to have a much longer career. So nice and close, my section is combed, is taut, right up to the root using my arm and my first section. When I take my foil, I like to curve it slightly so that it fits closer to the natural head shape. Hold it like this to act as an anchor. And then get your lightener to act as the glue. Once you have that glue down a little bit, you can release, hold it at where you would actually have your section, and start to bring it down. You don't want to go too close to the foil with your lightener, or else when you go to fold your foil, it'll create what we call bleeding, where the lightener has seeped from the foil. So I'll push it down, and then I like to go in and take my brush more of a vertical and do that to make sure that if there was any little bumps in the hair or I couldn't get close enough to the root, that this helps to sweep down the hair and smooth everything out so that we can get as close as possible. Now I scoop up my bottom and start to fold it in. You don't want to sit there and mush it around like that because when you go to the basin to rinse them out, it actually will create some knotting and then you could get some breakage in through the mids and ends. Now I'll go into the middle of my foil, take my fingers, put my thumbs underneath, and do a flick, using a little bit of tautness in through the bottom there to help fold my foil. Then I want to push it nice and close right along the root line. I take my brush or comb, fold that, make another nice line there, fold that, and then I like to smooth out my bottom. Do not push it too hard up this way, or else again, you're going to have the lightener start to seep out the top, and then we'll have what we call bleed marks, where this whole line up here actually turns to be like the color of like an orangey cheetah. It's not very pretty. I like to keep my foils nice and clean so that I can see where I'm going when I'm working my way up the scalp, especially because when it comes to starting to take your sections on the next side, if your foils are all messy and you can't see your line here, you're going to end up grabbing hairs from this section and it's going to rip out of the foils. Okay, so then I take my next section, comb it, twist it, clip it away. Now, since my first two pieces were more of a baby light is very beautiful for dispersing color throughout the hair. And when you're talking in terms of visualizing the size, it would be more of like an angel hair pasta. Again, it's nice for making little glitter throughout the hair. Whereas if we're going to use more of a spaghetti size weave, that is going to give you a more noticeable blonde highlight in the hair as opposed to it being more like a tinsel throughout the hair. So I have my section, hold it nice and tight. Take it, put that down, get it nice and clean. Take my foil, slight bend so that it fits to the head shape. Put it under. Use my hand as my anchor and my lightener as my glue. Get a bit of glue on there, drop my hand, go where my section is and start to sweep down. Again, don't bring it up too close to the root line. Scoop up from the bottom. More of a circle. Then I go vertical brush strokes, making sure that I am able to get as close as possible to the root line. Middle of my foil, taut. Nice and clean. Now, if you are working your way through your head, and you have an accident where you've taken your piece and you go to apply your lightener and oops, I went over my foil. Not to worry. What you're going to want to do is make sure this is glued down. Take a cloth, wipe it away the best that you can. Try and make sure that you remove as much of the lightener off of the scalp as possible. Take a new foil, same thing, curve it, flip it up, put it under, hold, and get rid of that guy. And then carry on as you normally would. You have to make sure that you replace the foil because if you simply just wipe and then carry on, there's still going to be that line of color behind the edge of the foil and it will create a bleed mark. When the round of the head starts to get thicker, that's when I reach for my larger foils. You don't want to be using at the nape of the neck the larger foils because it'll become incredibly messy. And with the hair being so delicate down there, it's going to pull down on your foil and then again resulting in some bleeding. So you always want to be changing up the size of your foils as you go through the head to accommodate the size of the section. When it comes to doing highlights, it's very important that you get as close to the root line as possible. Anytime we have anyone coming back into the salon to have a redo on their highlights, it's because most times the highlight wasn't placed close enough to the regrowth, and they feel like although they just had their highlights done, it looks like there's about a month worth of regrowth in there. And I'm just following the natural head shape. And as you can see, as I'm taking my slight angle up the head, because of the round of the head, it is starting to create a natural V, which by the time I get to the occipital bone, where we took our V in the beginning, it will all line up. So again, if you didn't create the V up here for that section, not to worry. Just naturally going up and following the head shape will create a natural V. So when it comes to the size of your weave for your highlights, you have a few options to choose from. Like in the bottom, where you do the baby lights, that is just a micro fine highlight with very little hair selected. If you think you have too much hair, you have too much hair. You need to go back in and make it even finer and more micro of a section. The next would be spaghetti size. So these are more of your traditional pieces that you're going to find in most people's highlights. And these will still create a nice natural end result. They'll get you nice and blonde. But they just are the main one that you'll be using on a day-to-day if you're doing a traditional head of highlights. The next one would be what we would consider to be the linguini pieces. So those are a little bit chunkier, a little bit fatter. Those would be the types of highlights that you would put in really curly hair, really thick, dense hair, when you need it to be a little bit more noticeable, but still well blended. This is going to give you a lot of impact in the hair too. If you do have someone who has fine hair and they want to be blonde in a hurry, putting these pieces in will help to cover more area, but you need to be cautioned though. With fine hair, you're going to see every single weave and piece that you put in there. So you want to make sure they're nice and close to the regrowth. And then your last one would be a slice or a lasagna piece. So this is for maximum impact. You are going to cover as much ground as possible with these pieces. They actually disperse in the hair really beautifully, so they're not super noticeable and super chunky. But they do cover a lot of area, and all of this gets painted with your lightener. So if you do have someone who is wanting to be basically a pre-lighten tone without actually doing a full pre-lighten tone, we would do slices throughout the entire head. If you have somebody who it's their first time getting highlights done and they're going from virgin color, we would do slices throughout the head to ensure that you don't have too much depth still left in there, so it does feel like they've had something done to their hair. Again, because it is the size of a lasagna piece, it can seem a little bit daunting, but it actually disperses really beautifully in the hair. And same thing with all your other pieces. You just want to stick close to the root line and just glide it all the way across, for your slice. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to continue on with spaghetti pieces. If you have somebody who is coming back for a touch-up on their highlights, or they have already lightened ends, you would do your same process, trying to pick out either the darker pieces or the blonde pieces that you're just touching up for the regrowth purposes. Nice and close to the root. And then you just want to make sure that you're touching up just where it needs to be, bringing the lightener just above the line of demarcation. There is a thing called bleach creep, which means when your bleach starts to oxidize and expand in your foil from the heat of the foil and your scalp, it will start to puff up and move up a little bit. So you don't want to overlap and bring it all the way over the blonde, or else it's going to get over processed. So bringing it just to the line of demarcation where the regrowth ends and the old blonde starts is perfect. And then same thing, I would just touch up my spots, getting as close to the root as possible, and then just flick it away like that. If you have some pieces in there that are blonde, but you want to get the other pieces that are darker, after this point, you would just pick out your darker pieces, or your lighter pieces, sorry. Move those off to the side so that they don't get oversaturated with lightener. And then just continue coloring the darker pieces. Making sure you keep those ends out. Flip, press, lock it in.